There's been a coup in Niger, a country in Western Africa, which used to be a French colony. The elected French-friendly president has been detained by his own military leaders who have now taken over the country. The head of Niger's presidential guard has named himself head of the transitional government. He has suspended the constitution, has closed the borders, and implemented curfews. And he says the takeover was necessary to avoid the gradual and inevitable demise of the country. Now, Europe and the U.S. have called the coup illegitimate and are cutting the country off. There's been threats of military action by other Western African nations. And then there are other nations joining Niger saying that if there's military action against Niger, they will join them in fighting back. So it's a mess. And many wonder, what's the U.S.'s role in all of this? With us now is Simon Atiba. He is the chief White House correspondent for Today News Africa. Simon, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kim.
So give us kind of the background, who this president was and why he ended up getting basically ousted by his own military.
So President Mohamed Bazoum came to power in 2021. He was the first transfer of power from one democracy to another. And, the reason he was overthrown is also the reason you've had coups in Mali and Burkina Faso. After 63 years of independence from France, most people are still living in poverty. For those who are watching now, Niger is a country in West Africa. They have about 27 million people. And more than 10 million of those people live in abject poverty. It means they live on less than $2 a day. And so that's more than 41% of people who cannot afford to eat. And people are just fed up. I spoke to people who come from Niger, and they tell me that people are just fed up. It seems that democracy is not actually paying off for most of those people. And that's at the time where they have mineral resources, uranium, and other resources that go to France, and they don't actually get the benefit. And
So
so
give
they
us
are
a little
fed up.
bit, yeah, so give us a little bit more background on this with the democracy that's there, because what we're hearing in the news is that this is a coup against the West, that this is the French-backed government is being ousted. So it almost sounds like in a lot of the independent media that France is being ousted from Niger, but France was already ousted from Niger. So how was this government somehow French-backed or friendlier to France, or kind of give us a little bit of that, a glimpse of what that actually was like?
Okay, so one of the biggest players in West Africa, those three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they are neighbors. And you've had a coup in Burkina Faso. You've had a coup in Mali. And now you have a coup in Niger. And President Biden, when he hosted 50 African leaders in Washington, D.C. last December for the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, did not invite Burkina Faso and Mali because of the coups that took place there. And
Yeah.
so France still had a big influence in Niger. They colonized them, and Niger got their independence from France in 1960. But since then, even after they received their independence from France 63 years ago, life has continued to be difficult for the majority of the people. They have all this wealth, but they are not benefiting. People don't have anything to eat. More than 10 million people go to bed hungry. And if there are different issues: poverty, exploitation by France, and also Russia. Russia is having a big impact because, the war in Ukraine. What we realize in West Africa is most of those countries are strengthening ties with Russia. They just came back from the Russia Africa summit that took place just less than a week ago. And those are the people who were not invited for the US Africa Leaders Summit. When they got to Russia, he actually gave a speech, the young president of Burkina Faso, Traore. He gave a speech and he said, I want to ask you a question. How do you explain that Africa has all the mineral resources, all the human resources, but most people in Africa still live in abject poverty?
Yeah.
You say, "Forgive me, I need to ask you that question." And so poverty is at the center, corruption is at the center, the exploitation by France, and the fact that those people, those countries can now receive help from Russia.
So how were they being exploited by France exactly? So because I just want to make sure that everybody kind of understands and kind of imagines the picture of what's going on there. The leader that was ousted is not like a white French guy. So this isn't like, because
No.
that happened 60 years ago. So this is, was this leader really truly democratically elected, would you say?
Yes, he was democratically elected. I remember we wrote the story last year when he came to power. Um, he wasn't a white guy, he's a black guy. But let me explain to you how they are being exploited.
Okay.
So Niger has is the world's seventh producer of uranium. And they have diamonds, they have other mineral resources. But the majority of the people don't see any benefit to having those things. The uranium in Niger, for instance, has been exploited by France in the past 50 years. So even though they got independence 63 years ago, for those 50 years, France has been exploiting mineral resources. And also, you know that France right now still print currencies for 14 African countries. Niger is part of them, Mali is part of them, Burkina Faso is part of them. And because they are printing that money for those countries, they keep that money in the central bank in France and they pay them billions and billions of uh, euros every year. And so, as a result, those countries live in poverty. They have mineral resources that don't bring anything to the people. And so that's how they're being exploited. I want to say something about democracy. So, in a country where poverty is so high, where you have 80% of the people in poverty, what happens is the little resources that you have go to the top, maybe 2%, the people in power. And
Yeah.
so there's actually no democracy. You know, people vote, they pay them to vote. And so the people have not seen the benefit of being independent and the benefit of having mineral resources that are being exploited by the West.
Do you think that the people who are voting, are they just voting because they're used, it's like the same old, and they're used to it? So they're like, well, we just keep voting for this same political system, the same political person, because they don't really, they can't, like, is there no other alternative?
No, so I used to cover election in Nigeria, Cameroon, and different places in West Africa. The way it works is people are impoverished. They don't have money. They don't have anything to eat. So when the elections come, the people in power who have all the resources go to those people and give them some money.
Ah,
Usually they pay them to vote for the person that they want to vote for. And they give them things like $3, $4. And for those people, for people who live on less than $2 a day, having $4 or $5 of $10 is a huge amount of money, and to vote for the person in power.
interesting. That reminds me of the old Roman Empire. That's how they did it. They would basically bribe people to vote for them by giving them a variety of things. We can't do that here in America. At least they're not supposed to. But so you're saying that it's almost like bribery. They go to the poor people and they say, "Oh, we're going to give you this if you vote for me," and it's just it's that okay. So now this new the military leadership. This is why you always have to have the military on your side, because once they turn on you, you're going to lose power. The military always has to back whoever's in power. That's just age old, forever. So the military takes over. What do you think their plan is? What are they going to? How are they going to make change?
So it's going to be very difficult for them. Right now, people on the street, they are praising them and celebrating the coup, but they won't have enough money. As you know, President Biden announced, the US government announced a few hours ago that they are evacuating Americans, and they are also suspending security cooperation with Niger. And as you know, there are about 1,000 American soldiers in Niger, about 1,500 French soldiers in Niger. But in neighboring Mali, you have about 1,000 Wagner soldiers who are there and who are helping them. So it's going to be difficult for them if the US pulls out and if French soldiers also pull out. We have problems with uh, having even access to financing, having being able to fight terrorism in the region. And so it's going to be difficult for them, and the same people who are praising them now may actually turn against them.
So this could be completely destabilizing to the country for a while.
Not just to the country, but for the region. As you know, Mali and Burkina Faso, they won the African Union and ECOWAS that if they use force to reinstate the ousted president, we go to war. And the reason they are saying that because they also ousted their own presidents. So you now have three neighboring countries where soldiers are now in power, and it means that democracy is actually backsliding in Africa. But
Yeah.
as I said, people realize that even with democracy, they are not having any dividend. They don't see any benefit to the democracy. And, they are still in poverty. They are still without electricity. They still see how their mineral resources are being exploited by France and the West. And, a portion of that, those resources go to the people in power.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I mean, is it worth the trade? Is democracy worth giving up because you're poor, you don't have resources, and so you think, okay, it's better to just not have democracy anymore because maybe then I'm not going to be starving. I would imagine. I mean, if that really is truly the choice, I think most people probably would choose not to die, not to starve to death, not to be poor, and they would give up their democracy in order to have that because it's like the lesser of two evils. How I can't even create democracy if I'm dead, if I've starved to death, and I can't even get to that point. But it's a pretty hefty trade-off because there's no guarantee that they're going to get democracy back at this point.
Yeah, because when the soldiers come to power, it usually gets worse.
Right.
You don't have even the freedom that you had before, and you may not even have an election. So there won't be an opportunity to bribe you, to give you $5 to vote for maybe in the next election. And so you'll be tough, but the people are hungry. They are broke, they don't have access
Right.
to education, access to healthcare, and they see their mineral resources being exploited by France. And the US is playing a big role. As you know, the US used to spend billions, hundreds of millions of dollars to France to fight terrorism in that region, in the Sahel region. And France wasn't actually involving the people there. They were going there, killing innocent people and tagging and labeling them terrorists. And they send a press release to us. And the same thing is happening right now in Somalia, where the US will actually bomb people and kill them and send us a statement and said we killed some terrorists. And there's no investigation here in Washington, D.C.
Ugh, gosh. Okay, so let's get to Russia on this because you say that Russia is heavily involved. You got the Western countries that were backing the recent government that just got ousted, but Wagner Group's Prigozhin is actually celebrating this coup, saying that the now the Western-backed government is ousted, and that Western-backed government was yeah, European, was French-backed, and also was propagating terrorism. Can you explain that a little bit? Is there any truth to that there was terrorism being propagated by the West in that region?
Okay, I'm not sure there's terrorism being propagated by the West, right? But they're not doing anything. People are not seeing any changes to their lives, and they are also seeing terrorism from different groups. You have Al Qaeda, you have Boko Haram, some Boko Haram, and then you have the proliferation of small weapons that came from Libya. You remember when Libya fell, a lot of those weapons that used to be in Libya began to circulate across the region in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and even in Niger, all the way down to Nigeria. As you know, Niger shares a border with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Nigeria. And and so that's what is going on. And right now, Russia is playing a big role because those people have been disappointed by the West, because this is what happens when they overthrow the government. Usually, Blinken will give them a call, or anyone who is the Secretary of State in the US, they will call them. They will say, "We've suspended. If you don't reinstate the government, we will suspend financial assistance and
Yeah, we'll
security
sanction
cooperation."
you. We'll do more
We sanction.
sanctions. Yeah,
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 yeah, and so when they sanction those people, which is what they've done, um, the people who actually end up paying are the
yeah.
common the common people, the common folks in that country. And the worst thing, they prevent them from attending the US Africa Leaders Summit in December. So you can't even engage those people. And so you abandon them. And that void has now allowed Russia to come in and tell them, hey, we can actually help you. In Mali, for instance, the government there invited the Wagner group to fight the terrorists, and to some extent they've been successful. And so that's why you have there. The reason Russia is becoming so prominent in the region is because of terrorism. Russia is actually helping them to fight
Yeah.
terrorism, and Russia is telling them, we didn't colonize you. We are your friends, and we'll be there for you, and we will protect you if the US and France, try to use force against you. And they're also supplying them with weapons.
What do you think Russia's reasoning for that is? Like,
No,
why do they care about this region? Why do they want to get in there and say, hey, we could be friends?
no, because they have their own interests, but also because of the war in Ukraine. The US is supplying weapons to Ukrainian, and they feel they're isolated, and right now they feel like the best way to fight back, not just in Ukraine but also in Africa. They are telling them the US doesn't want to talk to you in Mali, doesn't want to talk to you in Burkina Faso, doesn't want to talk to you in Niger, and we will talk to you, we will give you the assistance that you need so you can resist them. And also because people feel fed up. These are people who colonized them. These are people who invaded their land, colonized them, killed them, and sold them into slavery. And they don't see them as the good people.
Right.
People hate France in many of those countries. In Cameroon, in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, they don't like France. They feel like France is a colonial power that is exploiting them, but not doing anything, and they don't see any benefit.
Yeah. So, what do you think well, first, I actually want to play this clip. We do have the military leader from Burkina Faso saying that if the U.S. sends troops, or if there's a war at all with
Yeah, the
Niger,
African Union.
yeah, then there's going to be war in Mali and Burkina Faso as well. So here's him saying that.
4. Avertissent que toute intervention militaire contre le Niger s'assimilerait à une déclaration de guerre contre le Burkina Faso et le Mali. Je répète. 4. Avertissent que toute intervention militaire contre le Niger s'assimilerait à une déclaration de guerre contre le Burkina Faso et le Mali. Je répète pour une dernière fois. 4. Avertissent que toute intervention militaire contre le Niger s'assimilerait à une déclaration de guerre contre le Burkina Faso et le Mali.
So there he is saying that a war with Niger is a war with Mali and Burkina Faso. What is going on right now? Do you think that the U.S. or France going to actually send troops in to
No,
Niger?
they cannot. I've gone there. These are is the Sahel region is a very difficult. The US already has about 1,000 troops in Niger. France has about 1,500 troops, but it will be a war that can never be won. And so what they are saying essentially is when you impose this sanction, you punish the ordinary people. You are not punishing the people in power. And we've seen it in Zimbabwe, in different places where they impose sanction and the people stay in power for decades. And those who end up suffering are the common man, the mom and dad, the farmers, the people who don't have access to the international financial system. And they're saying that if the use force, if the African Union and the ECOWAS is the West African regional body, uses force, if they use force against Niger, they will declare war.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for them to attack them now. And,
What do
and that's where the
you
US is evacuating, people already.
Right, starting to evacuate. Yeah, so they're just and the French are evacuating their people as well. And what do you think? What do you think is going to happen then? What do you think? What do you project will happen?
So I think that the US has to be pragmatic, understand that the people are fed up. People are celebrating on the street. Of course, the soldiers will not bring the relief that the people are expecting. They're expecting democracy, they're expecting wealth, and they want to be able to feed and go to school and have access to, healthcare and all the rest. They won't have those things overnight. But the US has to understand the sentiment, the anger, and the resentment, the fact that people feel no one is there for them, even after independence. And the US has to cooperate directly with them instead of giving millions of dollars to France to protect those countries. They should actually give money to the people in Niger, the people in Burkina Faso, and the people in Mali, and ask them to return those countries to democracy. I don't really know how it will work because when those people taste power, uh, power actually ends up corrupting them, and they end up staying
Yeah.
in power for decades.
Right, right. Yeah, it's going to be really difficult now to kick the military out of power. I mean, this is what we see in like Pakistan, where they pretend to have democracy. They pretend to elect leaders, but in reality, behind the scenes, everybody knows that, when American leaders fly into Pakistan, they're not meeting with Imran Khan, when he was in power. They meet with the generals because they're like, oh, the generals are the ones who's actually in charge there. And then they
Yeah.
give this facade of democracy, like, oh, yeah, we'll let you elect a leader that we approve, and we'll pretend like you've elected this person and make it seem like you have democracy, but in reality you don't have any at all. And so, with Pakistan, the US has been greatly funding that military, keeping that military regime in power. Curious how that's going to be in Niger. I wonder if it's going to be Russia that then funds the country and those military leaders to keep them friendly with Russia and to keep them in power. It could be another, basically the same situation, just different players. Um, and ultimately, the people end up suffering because, as you said, power corrupts. So once they get a taste of that power and they get a taste of the wealth, they might not give it up. They might not actually distribute it to the people at all. So it's really unfortunate. I guess my big fear on this is whether or not this turns into another proxy war between the U.S. and between the West and Russia. Is this just another battleground where we pick Wagner Group and then some players that we arm? I mean, heaven forbid it would be like Boko Haram. Would the U.S. Do you think the U.S. would do something as stupid as that? I mean, it's not like we haven't done it before.
Yeah, so it's going to be really. There's also another player, China. You
Right.
didn't mention China. China is
Yes.
expanding in influence. Russia is expanding. Russia mainly it has to do with security, terrorism, and security also means natural resources because once you control those a country, you also control the natural resources in those
Right.
countries. So I believe the way that we fund it, they will just begin to sell their mineral resources to maybe Russia and other countries and generate funds that way. But I don't know if those funds will end up in the hands of the people or will end up in the hands of the generals.
Right.
And then Russia and the US, they may have a proxy war where each side is arming some people. Yeah, we may have it. But China is also a big player.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eye on this, what's going on there, because I do think it could end up with just another proxy war location. Just when we think we're maybe gonna one day see a light at the end of the proxy war battle, we don't. Something else crops up, and Niger, I don't think was on. I don't think that was on any of our bingo cards necessarily. I think people were looking at other places. But very interesting. Simon, thank you for being here and giving us a bit of background and more information on this, and a better perspective. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
By the way, how are things going for you in the press pool? I mean, are they asking you questions? Are you getting
No,
attention at all? Are they
no,
ignoring
no.
you?
So no, they're ignoring me, and they implemented new rules on the 31st of July. So I don't know if I will have access to the White House next week, or even this
Where
week. President Biden is on vacation,
So they still didn't give
and
you the credential because they changed the rules and they said you have to spend time in a different location, right? First, before they'll give you White House.
yes, yes. So you need to have a credential from the Senate, the Supreme Court. So I'm still expecting the Senate to approve my application, and then I will apply for renewal at the White House. But I want to quickly say this, Kim.
Yeah.
What's happening to me at the White House is what's happening to the US in Africa. They don't pay attention. I'm an ally. I'm someone that has the influence and the platform to be able to drive conversation between the US and Africa. Instead of being there for me, what they are doing to me is to fight me and try to discredit me with hit pieces on the Washington Post and the New York Times, trying to say how, just trying to assassinate my character.
Yeah.
And in doing that, that's what they're also doing with, the US. They don't pay attention. China is increasing, Russia is increasing, expanding. Their influence in the continent, the US influence is waning because they're not paying attention until it's too late and the government has been overthrown.
Yeah, it does seem like Africa just gets ignored, and apparently Africans as well, yeah, unfortunately. So, Simon, well, best of luck. Hopefully you get those credentials and you get back in the White House so that you can do the reporting that you've been doing. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, guys, let me tell you about Field of Greens. I absolutely love this stuff. It is a fine powder that is made from dehydrated whole fruits and vegetables that are carefully selected to give you the most nutrients in your diet possible. So if you're having a tough time eating all your fruits and vegetables like you're supposed to, then all you need to do is get some Field of Greens, take a scoop of this powder, mix it into your ice water, and mix it up, drink it, and there you have it. Your daily allotment of fruits and vegetables in a delicious, it really is actually really good. I love the lemon lime flavor. It's a delicious, easy to drink. It's really liquidy. Some people ask, is this real thick? Is it creamy? No, it is not. It is much more like a tea. It has the consistency of a tea, and to me, it tastes like tea with some lemon in it. That's why I like the lemon lime. So it's a really easy way to get all of your fruits and vegetables into your diet. They also have really a lot of other great products at Field of Greens. They've got a product called Lean, which is just some pills that you take, and this will help rev up your metabolism, curb your appetite, give you a bit of energy. I don't get the jitters using Lean, which is really great, but it does give me a little boost. So I do like if I'm feeling a little tired and it's like, oh, got to go to the gym, but I'm not really feeling like it. Taking Lean really helps. And I also know that it's boosting my metabolism to help with my weight loss goals. So they have a lot of really great, super, super high quality products with Brickhouse. Really trust these guys. Great, great products. Go to their website and get 15% off your first order by using the promo code Kim at checkout. So that's, again, go to fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code Kim at checkout for 15% off your first order.